Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I am your host, Mike Veerman, and I am here with my friend and trusty producer, Max Kerman. Max, what's up, man?
I'm just sitting in your beautiful living room. You know, on an earlier podcast, Shane mentioned that you're living in a mansion.
Which is not true.
Which is not quite true, but it is really nice. It's a good score you got here.
Thank you. All the credit goes to Danica.
Yeah. Are you much of a home decorator guy?
Oh, you know me, Max. I've always got the magazines out with the different home decors. No, I don't care.
Actually, when you were single...
Oh, God.
Because your previous apartment when you were with Danica was very nice and like looked like you were some like kind of hot shot in Toronto.
Yeah.
And then you got your own place.
Right.
And it was...
I was single and in despair, Max.
Yeah,
you know?
just yogurt and water, right?
I don't even think I had that in the fridge.
No, you didn't have that. You had like some hot sauce, and that was the only thing you'd ever have in the fridge, and some bottles of water.
Yeah, so yeah.
Or like chocolate.
There was chocolate. Danica and I were apart for a while, which we talked about before in the pod. And so in that time, I got this kind of like small apartment in Toronto. And then once we got back together, we were like, well, hey, like let's go back to Hamilton somewhere. But before then, to save money, why don't you move into this apartment, Dan?
Yeah,
so
it just made sense that she moved right back in.
And you told a story about how you were, because sometimes you'd stay there with your girlfriend, Lauren.
So that's right. So occasionally you and I would do an apartment swap, which is different than a girlfriend swap, unfortunately. But where you'd have to be in Hamilton for a weekend to visit your family.
Yep.
And I have to be in Toronto to visit my family. Mm-hmm. And so we just said, I'll just stay at your place, you stay at my place. And Lauren would be with me, and Lauren thinks very highly of Danica. Danica is a very like proper, put together person. She's very impressive.
If only she listened to this pod, she would hear all these nice things.
No, I tell her this. But Lauren, we were like waking up, and she's like, I'm really surprised. Don't mention this to Danica, but that Danica lives here because this place is so unbecoming of her. And then I was like, I'm pretty sure Danica has not put any thought into the apartment at all because she just cannot wait to move back to Hamilton and get her own place.
Yeah, she's just killing time.
Yeah, she was, and then I mentioned it came up in conversation when I was over at your place. Danica was over, and you mentioned the song that she would sing every morning as she was getting up for work.
She'd wake up every morning and then she would dance by the bed and she'd go, I hate this apartment. I hate this apartment.
I hate this apartment. So she really hated that apartment.
She did, and I loved it.
Me too. I love the apartment.
It's awesome.
Yeah, guys don't need much. There's a guy on Twitter, shout out to one of our favorite basketball writers, Net, and then W3RK.
He's very funny if you're into the NBA or Game of Thrones.
The Game of Thrones, yeah. And he had one funny tweet that he was like, legit, if I didn't have a girlfriend, I could live under an underpass as long as it was near a library with Wi-Fi or something like that. And I was like, I totally identify. I was like, I don't need much.
So we're recording this pod in Hamilton. Exciting. Fresh start.
Yes.
But this has been a pretty big week. Some shocking stuff went down.
Prince died.
How'd
you find out?
I was at work,
yeah,
and I was sitting there, and one of my coworkers beside me, Amit is his name.
Shout out to Amit. He listens to the pod.
I don't know about that. So I'm sitting there, and I kind of got my headphones on. I'm editing some stuff, and I just hear, it sounded like died. And I go, who died? And I couldn't quite make out what he was saying. He's got like a little bit of an accent. And I thought he was saying Durst died, like Fred Durst died. This is what I thought he said.
On the cultural spectrum, could not be further away than Prince.
I was like, Limp Bizkit? Like Fred Durst? Like I couldn't hear what he said. He's like, no, Prince died.
Yeah, the S on the end. Durst,
yeah,
Prince.
Yeah, I don't know. And then I was like really shocked.
Uh-huh. Were you a big Prince fan growing up?
More of a Limp Bizkit guy. No, I liked Prince. I was aware of him. My dad dug him, but I wasn't like live and die by Prince. Know all the hits, obviously, that like all of us know. I can't say that it was like, I looked at Prince and I looked up to him and I wanted to emulate him. But I always respected him because he would always like rip these bitchin' guitar solos. And it's like, because he was in that category of like, he's like an icon like Madonna or Michael Jackson or any of these other sort of like singular icons. Uh-huh. And because he's making pop music, you sort of think, oh, like them, he's an entertainer that sort of sings and dances, which he did do. But he was also this sort of all-world musician, No,
yeah. It's interesting to see... To realize how many songs you actually know when something like this happens. When you're like, oh yeah, he wrote that and he wrote that and he wrote that. Now here's a question. Okay, now that we're living the social media age, do you think people are just jumping on the bandwagon and professing their love to somebody when they didn't really actually have that kind of love for the person in reality, but it's just sort of like a hip thing to do?
It's a good question
because I feel like that was happening a little bit with the Prince stuff. And by the way, there's enough people out there eulogizing the amazing artist that Prince was, and we'll do it a lot more eloquently than us. So we're going to let them do that. But all love to Prince. Prince is obviously a madman genius who wrote lots of music, yada, yada, yada.
Other people's eulogies were more articulate. Were you a Prince fan?
I like Prince.
Yeah.
I definitely, and I admire him in like the kind of like the dedication to the craft and the giving no f***s about like what a previous expectation was put upon him. Because he started as more of a pop star, and then he sort of turned into like a rock and roll, he put up Purple Rain, which is a big rock and roll record, and he kept on transforming himself, which is why I love Bowie too. It's just like, that he never repeated himself, which I thought was really cool.
Like Bowie, I listened to. Like in high school, like I had Bowie on a lot.
Yeah.
I never had a Prince record.
Yeah, Prince is in some ways a little like arty or something for me. Like
I like his vibe. Like I found as I got older, I dug Prince more and more. And like you said, he didn't give
you
any
appreciated
fucks.
him too.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, I was watching on Saturday night. I got home and I was watching because SNL ran just.
I haven't seen it yet. I got it PVR'd.
It's great. It's really awesome. I highly recommend you check that out. And I started doing the math on like his first performance was in like 82 or something like that. And anyway, he performed on SNL at a very young age.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, and each performance kind of gets better and better. And he doesn't seem to age either. He just kind of looks the same.
I read a thing about him today where he mentioned, this is what he said. He said, I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, I saw you at your peak, like in concert. And he says, how do you know where my peak is?
Yeah.
He's like, I might peak. He's like, when I listen to my old records, I'm embarrassed of the playing. He's like, I only get better, which I think a lot of people say, which is true. But that's an interesting thought too in like a pop culture world, right? And relevance and
well, he was such a virtuoso. He started like when he first became popular, he was still way ahead of every musician that I know, right? Like he's amazing. But it's just amazing to see like how much thought was put into those early performances. We're like, oh man, this kid is in his early 20s and he's just destroying. It's pretty amazing.
This is where I'm going to aggregate another podcast. But did you listen to Klosterman talk to Simmons?
Yeah.
And he said, Klosterman said he saw one of Prince's teachers talking years ago
I love
in
this
Minnesota.
Story. I highly recommend you check out Bill Simmons' podcast if you don't listen to this one.
Absolutely.
And he said...
It was a teacher, and she's from the Minnesota area, and she's like, I had this student, and I could never get him to do work. I just couldn't get him to do his homework. He didn't care about his work. And I'd be like, you need to do your work. And he goes, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be famous.
I know. I love
that kid grew up to be Prince.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're actually right when they say that. You know what I mean? Anyways, I always like that. Because it's like Prince has always been Prince, it would seem. But to your question originally about, everybody just kind of jumping on the massive wave of mourning that I think we like to do as a society, I find that Twitter becomes...
And like Facebook posts, you can throw
that I don't want to say they become unbearable because people are going to grieve in whatever way they want to grieve or connect with other people. Sometimes they're not even really hurting, but they want to like... It's a way of sharing. If I say, Prince meant this, and then someone likes it, it's all part of what we all get out of social media. But yeah, it's like every time someone goes that people kind of knew, there's this outpouring. Now, I mean, do those Facebook posts annoy you?
No. Okay, I guess I'd say this, is that maybe just because Prince hasn't been like as culturally relevant in the last like 10 years, there hasn't been as much of a chance to talk to him. But it just seemed like there's a lot of like Prince fans coming out of the woodwork day. I was like, oh, really? Okay. But maybe, you know what? Who knows? Maybe that's music that was formative to these people's like early lives or something like that.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. That's a little cold-hearted. You can cut that out.
No, it's interesting. I think it is true because we all think it when we see it. I think other people think it as well when they read those things.
I guess I kind of felt as a musician, I was like, am I obliged to have something to say about Prince like on the Arkells page? I do like Prince, and I've gone through a Prince phase, but I didn't have anything to say. I felt like it wasn't really my place to pour out my heart because it's like,
well, if it doesn't feel authentic or you don't feel like you have anything to say, then it becomes artifice. If it doesn't, people can smell too if it's not authentic. And if you're just making a statement to make a statement because you sing for the Arkells, then it's like that doesn't really serve a purpose, I don't think.
No, it's true. And if you're making a statement after everybody dies, then it's like, this guy.
Yeah. All right. R.I.P. Prince.
Yeah.
Moving on. Today on the show, Max, we have Pete Yorn.
Pete Yorn.
I feel like you were excited about this one. You know, when the opportunity came through, you're like, let's do Pete Yorn.
Yeah, I've always liked Pete Yorn. I remember hearing an interesting story about Pete Yorn. He came up around the same time. I don't know if this is true or not, but he came up around the same time as John Mayer. And I think there was a big bidding war between like Sony and Columbia ended up snagging John Mayer, and Pete Yorn went with Sony. I think that's how it worked. And John Mayer immediately was like an arena tour, basically.
Exploded.
And Pete Yorn wasn't that. And I think by some metrics, maybe underachieved, to like who is, like, and if you get drafted in the same year as Michael Jordan, then you'll always be compared to Michael Jordan. So, but he's actually had a great little career. And I don't know, I think there's something to be said for somebody who's able to continue to produce records and at a high rate and like it doesn't get jaded by the music industry.
No, and tour and get it on the road. And we talk about all that. He's got an album out called Arranging Time, which came out in 2016. We talk a bit about that. We talk about his song Halifax, which you wanted to know about. Some Canadian content.
Did we ever talk about Scarlett Johansson?
We did not.
So he put out a record with Scarlett Johansson, which is really good, in 2009.
Yeah.
And the best song on the record is called The Relator, and it was the theme song for a baseball trip I went on with my dad. Like it's a really great song. But I really wanted you to ask questions about Scarlett Johansson.
I felt like he'd probably been asked about her so many times.
No, that's why you're a professional, and that's why
I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to be like, hi, Pete. So what was it like to hang out with Scarlett? Is she pretty? Is she kind? Yeah, but actually I have a bone to pick with you, Max.
Yes.
You put in the questions as the producer. We go over these questions. You wanted to know if being attractive or good looking could be detrimental to one's success. Maybe because if you're like an authentic singer-songwriter, you're writing songs from the heart, but then you're also kind of like, you got these good looks. Do you find it impedes you, or does it help your career?
Yeah.
Was essentially, I think, like that was the essence of the question.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to ask this question because it's weird to ask a man when you're standing across from him, hey, what's it like to be so good looking, dude? Is that like bad or good? So I wasn't really feeling it. And we kind of talked about it in the pre-production, and like you and I, and I was like, I don't know. And you're like, no, but there's something there, man. There's something there, Mike. Like, just ask him, Mikey. Like, I think it will work. So because I was already a little hesitant, I kind of like, I'm not very confident when I ask it, and I stumble over it like I'm asking like someone out on a date. Like, it is awkward. You'll hear this in the interview, by the way, once we roll it. And the minute I ask it, he looks over at his dude who's sitting on the couch, and he kind of, I'm not around, he rolled his eyes. Like, I was like, I'm not lying. He kind of just like a, really? And in that moment, I was like, I am going to kill Max for putting me in this position.
Okay, I'll tell you where that idea came from. I listened to this podcast, another one I'll recommend, Bret Easton Ellis, who's a writer-director. He had Brandon Boyd from Incubus on the show. And like literally it seemed to me like for 45 minutes, they just talked about how hot he was in high school. And what it's like to be a hot guy trying to make serious art. And Brandon Boyd kind of like talked about his reality. Also, Bret Easton Ellis is gay too. So it's like, it also felt like he was sort of hitting on Brandon Boyd the whole time.
Okay. And how would Brandon like dig the line of questioning?
He totally identified with it. And it was, all I'm saying is that if you're a good looking guy, of course you're like, my life's pretty sweet. But also if you're trying to make like serious music and people just like think of you as a pretty boy with nice hair, that might be a little annoying. Like, I mean, probably for most people, it's like, whatever, I'm living a sweet life. So I'm not really particularly bothered if people like think a little less of me because I make up for it on so many other levels. But anyway, the way Brandon Boyd talked about it was very honest. And I was wondering, and it was clear that he had thought about it a lot. It was very introspective. And it seems to me like the way you're making it sound is that Pete Yorn was not that interested in talking about it.
No, we didn't get into that good zone where he opened up about, a lifetime of being very good looking and successful.
But it's true. He's like a hot singer-songwriter guy.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. The thing which is beautiful about this podcast is that we get to try stuff. That's the one thing we talk about a lot is like, let's try different stuff each podcast and see if we can kind of create a special moment that maybe these guys aren't getting in other interviews. And it's also good for your chops, man.
No, hey, I had to ask a question that I didn't necessarily want to ask, but I still did it.
And yeah, you did, and you cursed me out for it.
But it all works out in the end.
And you know what? Sometimes, there's got to be an expression about like shooting for the stars and falling on the clouds or something.
And once we figure it out, we'll say it.
Okay.
Let's get to Pete Yorn. All right. Well, I'm going to start with the mandatory Canadian question. Tell me about your song Halifax on the new record.
Yes. I love the idea of Halifax, for sure. The song, what can I tell you about it? It's kind of about getting out of your comfort zone, kind of shedding these restrictions that you might set on yourself, kind of fear, anxiety, leaving home.
Traveling, like leaving what you know, you mean?
Yeah, for sure. Leaving your familiar surroundings, for sure. And I think that someone that's close to me to happen to live there, spend some time there, inspired the song. So that's where it kind of came from.
When you say you like the idea of Halifax, I mean, what do you mean? Sort of like small town vibe, sort of the music?
Well, I love the music. I mean, it's no secret I'm a big Sloan fan.
I read that. I'm a huge Sloan fan. One Chord to Another was like my high school jam.
Yeah,
I love that album.
Unbelievable band. But just this kind of sleepy, kind of coastal town energy that I feel from that. Yeah.
What kind of music were you listening to when you were recording, arranging time?
I was just saying, not much. When I make a record, I kind of close myself off to what's going on musically outside of me. But leading up to it, I think I probably pulled some influences. But really, most of my influences come from just like interactions with people, movies. I think sometimes new musical influences come, but like a lot of the stuff is so embedded from like when I first learned how to play guitar or drums, these bands that I liked when I was like 12 years old, like it still just kind of comes through. So
sonically, you're sort of like living in this place that you've always sort of been drawn to, but then like thematically, it's like whatever you're pulling from your life.
Yeah, like the this record is one of those records I make where I kind of layer things and just kind of build them up from the ground up. So like each track that I'll lay down, like maybe I'll lay the drums down first, and the way that those sound will kind of take me to what I want to lay down next. Mm-hmm. Things typically, like if I go in and I'm like, I want to make this song sound like the Beach Boys, like if it ends up sounding nothing like the Beach Boys, it's probably a better thing, and that'll just happen naturally in the studio. Like there'll be jumping off points, but usually it changes, and there's little surprises along the way that just kind of like pop up, and you're like, oh wow, this sounds like something completely different. So right, and that's probably almost a better journey to go on in some ways. Yeah, for sure. I usually kind of suck when I try like too on the nose to sound like something. It's like I lose interest quick. So it's better when I just kind of let it flow where it's gonna flow, and then it becomes its own thing. I think more often than less.
So even though you're not really listening to much when you're making a record, do you what do you listen to in general? Is there anything that's happening in music right now that excites you? Whether it's big pop music or something maybe smaller alternative, less so.
Let's see. They were playing some amazing stuff on the bus last night. It was like that. What's that guy's name? Something Gilberto. It's amazing Brazilian music from like 1969. I guess they'd call it like maybe Tropicalia.
Was it more like
Tropicalia? Yeah, it was cool. And it was funny because it was after the show and we get on the bus last night, and like I always have so much music in my head. I'm singing all day, and the guys were like, "Oh, I'm gonna put on some music," and I was like, I don't want to hear any music. It's like, come on. It's like, all I hear is music. And all of a sudden they put this stuff on. I was like, whoa, this is really cool. So it's good to have an open mind, and like, definitely, because I listen to so much talk radio.
Sure.
Like Howard Stern, like in America, it's all I listen to is Howard
He's
Stern,
the best.
like all day long. And it's great having Sirius. I didn't have Sirius radio for a year or two because for some reason my car they screwed up and I couldn't get satellite.
The satellite, yeah.
And I was like, oh, but then I finally got it back and I was like, oh, it's the greatest thing. But what other like new bands I could tell you that I like No, new. I like the Tame Impala a lot. They're a pretty interesting band, doing some cool stuff. Um, but I don't know. I just like certain songs with certain kind of melodies that have a certain kind of emotion, or they say something that's really interesting, and that I usually resonate. But I'm not like super snobbish with music. I like there's certain pop music that I like that's really popular, um, but I kind of like go back to like a lot of the same stuff that I always listen to though when I do get back to music, and it's like still like the Smiths and Morrissey. What else do I go back to? Guided by Voices.
Sure.
Some of this kind of. Like,
it's always like the music that sort of made the most imprint on us and are most influential. You know what I mean? It's like whatever you grew up listening to, you find you always end up going back to after a certain point, I think.
yeah, it's funny like that. And it like even like you put on like old Van Halen and like that just like gets under my skin.
Yeah.
Like Unchained comes on or something. And I'm just like let it go. It's wake me right up. So yeah, but like when I hear like a new song that like really like I'm like wow, because so much stuff to break through right now. I feel like there's so much pressure to just sound like everything else. Like everyone like at radio is like, oh, it's got to sound like this or that, whatever. And I feel like the best stuff that changes stuff is the stuff that like just kind of sneaks through, like has its own thing, and just like doesn't sound like everything else. And I think that's like so much more important. And especially when you're talking about like context, like maybe it sounds like a lot of stuff that was like 20 years ago, but like it doesn't sound like everything that's right now. So I always that always strikes me, like when you hear someone like and they just have like this integrity, you could just kind of feel it, and you could tell by like that they stuck to their guns, in a way, and at the same time it resonates,
It breaks through, but it's authentic.
Yeah, like lyrically, it still resonates, and it doesn't matter that I even know the reference points because most people probably don't, or it's going to hear it for the first time, and it's cool to see that. I just kind of know it when I hear it, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good artists, but I guess ultimately it's like you just gotta have something to say, like what do you have to say?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna adjust the volume here a little bit, make sure we're good. You're a very subtle talker, and it's good. It's very calm.
Sorry, I talk quiet usually. Yeah, on stage it's funny. I feel this pressure to be like, "How's everybody doing tonight?" But that's a whole different energy. But really, if you hang out with me, I kind of talk quiet.
Yeah. You mentioned getting on the bus and then them putting, the dudes putting the music on. You being, I don't want to hear music. I guess my question is, touring in general. Have you always loved that life, being on the bus, or is it taxing? How do you view that? I mean, do you dig the camaraderie and the grind, or is it something that you find a bit burdensome, or work for that matter?
Anything you do, if you approach it the wrong way, kind of becomes like, repetitive or becomes quote unquote work. But like, I don't know, I'm so lucky to be able to play music and live this life that I live, that I just always remind myself like, all right, you're on tour, your wife's at home, your new baby's at home, I miss them a little bit, of course, but like at the same time, I'm not going to like create two negative spaces. Like, okay, I'm not at home with my family, so I'm going to make my time on the road also be crappy because I'm just wanting to be with them. Like, all right, you need to like get into this zone and focus here. And that's like a good exercise for sure. When I was a kid touring, it was different. I was like, doing it, well, a kid, I didn't tour till I was 27, but as a kid, and back then, it was all new. It'd go crazy and just, fueled by whiskey, for sure the whole time. And you could just do that for years and it was cool. But then after a certain point, that gets old and you kind of got to reinvent it for yourself. So like now, I don't know, like I just approach touring and like the shows more like I'm going to the gym, just kind of just focus. I just enjoy being more focused and clear and kind of experiencing it all for what it is rather than just kind of filling the boredom of there's a lot of downtime on the road, so it could become really kind of just mundane and you're just kind of like reaching for these highs that you felt when you were jamming in your basement when you were like 16 years old, drink a 6-pack with your friends and like you kind of want that same feeling because that's what music was early on. But like when you're doing it as a job, like it's like you kind of don't want to approach it like that. And I think this idea, like the old school rock star excess, all that, like that flew in the 70s and the 80s, and everyone's partying and doing whatever the hell they do. But I feel like, now with the way the business is and there's so much more expected of you now, like with social media, and everyone's got, different outlets that you're putting you have to talk to and put music out. I feel like it's just like it'll burn you out way faster than it would in the old days. So I don't know, I just like to approach it more like, I flipped it. I'm like, just more like an athlete, and just do it that way. And it's kind of been a lot more fun, because the old way, after a while, just burns you out, and it's not fun. It's like you hear all those stories, those horror stories. It's like, it was all great. And then behind the music, the excess, and everyone's like, oh, and they're all in rehab and shit like that. And I was like, I didn't want that. It's like, after a certain point, it's like, that. And just kind of like, let's figure out a new way. And it took a few years to kind of like transition into that, because you kind of miss the old way. Part of you misses that. But now it's like you could approach it fresh, and it's like it's new again. It's almost like it's like you're a kid again, which is cool.
It's pretty interesting. And like when you mentioned you read all these old things, I was watching that Eagles documentary. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, it's great.
It's phenomenal. The first part's the best part. I mean, and the second part's all right, but then they get into the sort of later touring.
Yeah.
But it's like, or like The Dirt, any of these sort of books, they always seem like really sort of entertaining when you're kind of like watching them. But then I think to live that constantly every day will absolutely like ruin a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. And believe me, as a kid, like I read all that stuff and I was like, that's the dream, and it's cool for a bit, but then, you got to kind of pull it back a little bit if you want to do it for long haul, and that's, so that's the deal.
You're back in the cycle of touring right now. You're promoting a new record, obviously. But when you're not touring, how's your time spent? Like, what's a typical day look like for you at home?
Oh, I'm a real simpleton. I'm a homebody. I'm hanging home with my wife, and I got a new baby. She's only 6 months old.
Congrats, that's amazing.
I'm super hands-on. Like, I'm like super like daddy guy at home. Like, I'm just like changing diapers, walking her around town. I'm loving that. So that's really cool. And and in between, I kind of like, do my work as well, play some music and get that all done. But yeah, when I'm home, I kind of just enjoy a real simple life, just with hanging out with them, my family. Yeah.
Very cool. It was being a dad such like a massive sort of like life shift. Is that something that you'd always wanted, like growing up? Or were you kind of like?
No, it's funny. I'll tell you right now, like I wasn't one of those guys who was like, I gotta have kids. Like I never knew if I wanted to really have kids. And my wife was pretty much the same way. She wasn't one of those girls who's like, oh my God, we have to have babies now. It wasn't like that. And we were both on the same page. And at some point, I figured I was going to, if she says, we go, we'll try. And, luckily we were able to try, and I had a good time doing that. And then we had a baby from it. And she's the greatest thing. People say, oh, it's such a cool thing. Or other people would say, it's going to change, your life's going to change. And you're like, well, what do you mean like by that? What do you mean? All I know is it's changed for the better. Like, I think she's been a great focus for like all my kind of crazy brain energy that I have like all over the place. And like to have this little girl to just focus on has been such a awesome thing for me. And hopefully for her as well. But, I'm just over the moon over this girl. Like, it's like the coolest thing ever. So yeah, my experience has been good. And I got a good partner. Like, my wife is so cool. She's a great teammate, and she's holding down the fort while I'm out here. So she's so cool for doing that.
That's pretty sweet.
Good sport. Yeah.
You've had a remarkable career so far, and it's been remarkably steady. But was there any point like where you thought you might have to try something else, whether it was early on or even like throughout?
What comes up for me right now, early on, there was definitely a point, before I got my first record deal, back in like, I want to say like 98. I graduated from college, and I went out to California in 96, and I opted to pursue music for a little bit. And if it didn't work out, then I was going to go to law school. And about 3 years in, I was kind of discouraged. I was like, nothing's happening. I don't know. And I just was having a bad day. And I remember I said to my friend who had just moved out there, and he'd known me since the second grade, since we were 7 years old, this kid Chauncey. I was telling him, like, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to do music. And he got so pissed off. He's an Italian kid from Brooklyn. Then he moved to my hometown. He's like, literally threw me on the grass and jumped on me. He said, you're f***ing doing this, you got to do it. And he snapped me out of it. And then, like, I kind of, like, got my shit together. And then an odd thing that happened, I was talking about before, I went and saw Canadian band Sloan at the Troubadour, and this very night we were so blown away by them that it was another thing. I was like, I don't know if I even should pursue music, because these guys are so good, and like they should be like huge in America, and they're not. So I don't know, is it even worth it? Like, if these guys can't be that huge, I'm like, well, I have no business doing anything. And right after that show, I walked down the street, I'm smoking a cigarette, and sure enough, I meet this guy named Walt Vincent, who's like a local producer. And he said he had a little studio in Van Nuys, and that would be the guy that like 2 weeks later I would record the first song that would be the start of Music for the Morning After with. So like that was a big night where I felt like these two emotions where like I was gonna just kind of quit, and then met this guy, and then we just like we got a little wind in our sails, and then everything started to fall into place. And then like maybe within 5 months I was signed to Columbia, and then it all started happening.
Real quick, after sort of nothing doing for 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you think if Chauncey hadn't thrown you to the ground, we'd be sitting here today?
It's hard to say because there's so many unknowns, you know. But that is a big moment that I still think about. And this guy after I started doing music, he said he's like, I'm going to support you in this endeavor. He's a character. He's like. But if you ever play Giant Stadium, we were from Jersey. He's like, if you ever play Giant Stadium, you gotta let me get up and play with you, and jam with you. And he doesn't know how to play anything. And I was like, all right, sure, dude, sure, whatever.
Give me a tambourine.
Sure enough, years later, Bon Jovi like invited us to open for them at Giant Stadium, and I thought he meant headlining. And he somehow knew before anyone knew. And he calls me. He's like, oh, I see you're opening for Bon Jovi at Giant Stadium. And I said, I get to play with you. And I was like, all right, you get to play with us. So he did, and it's actually on the internet. And he comes out on stage, and I tell the story, and he's just like, yeah, it's going nuts. It's hilarious. He learned Life of the Chain on guitar.
Oh,
it's like
so
so simple, and he played along, and he rocked it. He was great, and it was a big one. His dad was there, and yeah, it was funny.
That's hilarious. Yeah. You mentioned moving to LA, and you've lived there, I think, for most of your career, right?
Yeah.
You've been a part of a lot of high-profile tours. You just mentioned, obviously, opening for Bon Jovi. You've collaborated with Scarlett Johansson. For an artist, do you find LA to be inspiring because of the amount of artists that live there and opportunities? Or do you find it can be like sort of competitive in a debilitating way?
I don't think so at all. I think it's just a good place. And the world's gotten so much smaller now. Like, you could email tracks anywhere to anybody and just kind of like, collaborate. But, when I started, you couldn't do that. But I thought there's just a good pool of creative people there, and I have my family there. And I don't know. I was just, there's a cliche about LA. People think it's like, it's all little could be a strange energy for some people. Mm-hmm. But, I never fell into that, really. I just kind of surrounded myself with just kind of like really down-to-earth people and friends. I had a lot of friends that like moved out from school.
Like other artists, other musicians, or just
I don't hang much with other musicians, just like regular cats, regular guys. But somehow through all that, I met other really talented friends who, end up producing my stuff, with me. So I think it's a good place. I like the weather. I was in Syracuse for 4 years. It was very cold. I mean, you guys know a little bit about that here, but I was just ready for some nice weather, and so I've been there a while now. Yeah.
You mentioned that the world has really shrunk as far as music now. You don't necessarily have to be in LA. There's been a lot made about how the music business has changed over the last 15 years, and your career began, as the label world sort of began to change. It was sort of in that apex in a weird way. Can you describe sort of the periods of adjustment that you've had to make over the years as the landscape shifts for recording artists?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is people get lost in the mud with this. It's like music. Make some good music that you're passionate about, and that's what it comes down to. Like, if I'm making a song, I'm not thinking about how it's going to get out there or who's going to even listen to it. Really, I'm just kind of just making something that is taking me on a journey that resonates with me. And I think that's where it always needs to start. And ultimately, people love music more than ever. People digest it in many different ways, and that will continue to change and evolve. And I don't have any control over that. So I will say early on, I put out my first record on a major and came out in 2001. And it was right, just before it came out. It was done for a year before it even came out. And I remember Napster had come out, and I was no one knew who I was, but I got into Napster, and I would put some of my songs. And I remember sitting for hours on my computer, private messaging people on Napster who I was like, you like Jeff Buckley? Do you like Nick Drake? Check out this song, Strange Condition by Pete Yorn. I would just sit there typing for hours, sending out all these messages, doing my own kind of promo because I thought it was a cool thing to help get people to hear what I was doing. So I feel like, the way, the digitizing of music now, obviously it's, there's different arguments for both sides. I feel like for new artists, it's an amazing way to be able to maybe possibly get your music out there. At the same time, there's a lot of noise. There's so much stuff out there that's just like, you can't even pay attention,
Yep.
And it's cool to see how, like, as a reaction to how kind of the access to music is so easy now. You just get everything at a touch of a button. You got everything in your phone. Like, vinyl's become, more popular than it's been probably since the 80s,
Sure, yeah.
Because I think people are reacting like they just want to have another experience where they just put on a side and they chill out and they listen to a record side. So I think that's cool too. And like this record that I made now, Arranging Time, the plug of Arranging Time.
No, absolutely,
I really I spent 2 months sequencing it. Like, I really wanted to play as a whole record, not just like, a single and some other tunes. Like, I wanted to feel like every song was an event. So I was kind of old fashioned, but like, I don't know, there's still part of me that just wants to present it that way, even though I'm all for people breaking it up and playing it in any order that they want, So,
right. Did you think that there's something about, the record experience, like front to back, that people will get out of Arranging Time more so than if they break it up and listen to it as individual tracks?
I think it has a really nice flow to it, the way that I presented it, but at the same time,
Consume it how you want to consume it?
Consume it, absolutely. I'm not going to say, it has to be this way, because I really, I'm that open about it because it changes for me too, like ultimately you have to commit to a sequence if you want to do that, but it still changes for me. And sometimes I'll hear songs in different orders and I'll be like, oh, that's kind of cool flow too. So,
Yeah. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but Bret Easton Ellis has a podcast, which is pretty outrageous. He interviews a lot of interesting people, but he asked this question to Brandon Boyd of Incubus, and it's a weird question, but I was talking with my producer, we've always kind of been curious about like musicians who are like sort of naturally good looking. Do you think, because I think you fall into that category, that like...
Really? No. Okay.
Do you think that looks have gotten in the way of sort of people taking art more seriously if you're sort of a singer-songwriter, or do you think it helps?
I don't
or do you think it doesn't matter?
I think if you're good, you're good, and if you're good looking, then you're easier to look at, great, but at the end of the day, I think if any, like, I think it helps some crappier songwriters, like if they're good looking and girls have crushes on them or whoever has crushes on them,
they'll move more.
They might not be paying attention to like what they're actually going on about.
Yeah.
But like, if you're good and you're good looking, I mean, you got the jackpot.
Right. That's interesting. So like if you're sort of like a good looking singer-songwriter, maybe the music isn't up to snuff, you'll move more records, but I don't think you'll get the collective respect from maybe the industry.
So I don't know about anybody's respect or anything. I'm just saying that in the short haul, people might be more attracted to an image than actually what's going on behind the image. And if you get respect from any fans, that's valid for sure, whoever that is. But ultimately, just about, for me anyway, I've been, I've fallen under the spell of certain pretty face for sure, in music. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you want to listen to it still, or just want to look at it?
Sure.
So, yeah.
All right, last question. You mentioned that if things hadn't worked, you would have gone to law school. I guess with time and perspective, if you weren't doing this, what do you think you'd be doing? Do you think it would be in law, or do you think you would have found something else?
I don't know. I think over the years, I've definitely gotten more into like psychology and stuff like that, and just how people think and the mind and how I think, and what limits me, and how I get in my own way and all that sort of stuff. And I know that that's for sure a universal thing in people, so I think I'd be some sort of a psychologist or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think in a weird way I'm doing that now, with my music in some different kind of way, where people have come to me and said, like, it helps them, figure out stuff in their life, or figure out what they're feeling and stuff like that. So, I don't know, I see it as like a natural kind of progression.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time, man.
My pleasure. Great talking.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude.
All right, we are now in the dessert. It is me, Max, and our good friend and pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Shane, what's going on?
As you know, Mike, we just went on a road trip
With the nut.
with the Nut to celebrate the Raptors getting their ass kicked. And yeah, one of the...
So me, you, my brother, and the nut all went down to Indianapolis to watch the Raptors play on the road against the Pacers in the first round of the NBA playoffs.
In last year, we went to Washington,
With the nut.
and they got their asses kicked.
That is also true.
So we were kind of like trying to break the curse and go again. This time to Indianapolis, of course. And we were feeling good. Raptors fans were everywhere.
Everywhere.
Like it was like a huge annoying gang walking around Indianapolis, very cocky,
Just chanting Raptors
proud
stuff.
Canadians. They had what is that called?
Outside of the Pacers arena, they had like a little ragtime band, like you're like, you know, and it's like, you know, they get people into it. But all these Raptors fans had taken over downtown Indianapolis, and we were just like, people were taking turns jumping in the middle of the band and like dancing.
Oh, wow.
Like anywhere, like indie people were playing, Indianapolis people were playing music, there'd be a shit ton of Raptor people drunkenly dancing and just going, "Let's go Raptors!"
Oh, that's so
Any
obnoxious.
song would turn into "Let's
A
go
chant.
Raptors."
Oh, wow.
But I will say, because Canadians are so nice, whenever the band would stop, everyone would give them a huge round of applause,
Like
throw some money.
they were very like
They like the
accommodating
playfulness, yeah.
to our annoying behavior.
Because I don't think anybody pays attention to this ragtime band normally, and it was like 50 Canadians just dancing, like and wiggling their fingers and
That's
chanting.
awesome.
It was like a street party.
That's cool.
So I'm like, oh, we're actually gonna like kick their asses tonight, and I'm all excited, I'm all drunk, feeling good. I get to our seats, and they give us this little Indianapolis like towel, like it's a perfect size for a towel, like a towel, what ejaculate towel. But you know, it's like that perfect size towel they give. So everyone's like, oh, sweet souvenir, like, you know, but we throw it under our seats.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, we're here to support the Raptors.
Yeah.
Instantly, as soon as tip off, 3-pointer, we're down 7 right away. I'm like, oh shit, it's happening. Like the curse has begun. And then it didn't get better from there.
Yeah.
It started being humiliating. Like every time
It was
I
a
had
very humiliating game.
every time I had to pee, I just like hung my head in shame, and people would just say something in my face like, "Not so good now, are you?" It's like, "We the shit," you know, like instead of "We the North." And then yeah, it was clever. And then I ended up just like, I got so embarrassed, I just I picked my little towel up and buttoned up my coat to cover my Raptors t-shirt.
Yeah.
And then I just put on my towel as an Indianapolis like headband,
Oh, nice.
and I started rooting for the Pacers.
Oh, way more fun that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, I thought it would be kind of a funny thing. Like this will be funny, even and some of the people behind me were liking it, like how I turned because I was clearly a Raptors fan at the beginning. And then Mike goes, "I know what you're doing, and you better stop doing it because I'm gonna get furious."
Mike gets so serious watching basketball.
Yeah, he was deadly serious. So then I stopped doing that. So then the game's over. The game's like a wash. Who gives a shit? So we're trying not to get too down on it because we came to party first and foremost. Oh, the nut hooked us up too. We got to go to a private box for about 10 seconds because we got kicked out of it promptly. But PK Subban,
Oh, yeah.
Of the Montreal Canadiens.
yes, he was there in a box.
Who's he there with?
The girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
I actually didn't even realize he was in the box until he was leaving. And then someone was like, "Oh, that was PK Subban." And I was like, "Yeah."
Nice.
So that was cool. And then we got a free drink out of it.
Nice.
And then the game ended, and we went to a bar. And another thing that normally doesn't happen happened, which is we all made a tattoo pact at the bar.
This is all true.
But you mean that happens just about every time?
No, because I'm like the guy. I'll get anything tattooed on me,
Of course.
at any time.
Yeah.
Anyone knows that. I've
Yeah.
got girlfriends, mementos all over my body, infinity symbols, and like the thing my sister got. Like, what is that?
We'll have to post these to Instagram, by the way.
Yeah.
We will. We'll post all
An
the...
ankh, yeah. And I have a flamingo and a bunch of weird shit. So I get excited when a tattoo pack goes down.
Sure.
Like, we're drunk at this bar in Indianapolis, and there's a Braveheart poster behind us. And the Braveheart poster has Mel Gibson, painted face, with the quote that says, every man dies, but not every man really lives. But we're so drunk, we think this is the best quote ever.
Like it's speaking to us.
Oh, so you guys were like not laughing
We just driven 8 hours in Indianapolis, and we're together.
You're so proud of yourself.
We were like, that's actually true, you know? like we're out here living our lives. We drove
not
8
like
hours.
Those suckers back in Hamilton.
And it's like we kind of died out there on the battlefield, which was the basketball court that night. So we're feeling like, and when Mike says he's getting a tattoo, by the way, like it's crazy. Like I get excited because
I was in.
I did not ever picture.
Everyone was going to agree to that slogan.
I'm getting very pumped to get this, but then Greg wanted to change it to every man lives, but not every man really dies.
What does that mean?
Which didn't make any sense. We were like, okay, like it's kind of funny to switch the turn of phrase. And then we started walking to the tattoo shop, and then the nut he's ready to get a ridiculous tattoo too. He's like, what if we go to a strip club? And then we're like, yeah, strip club. So like we're kind of like ADD children, like a new idea gets brought up, and then I'm like, oh, what if we go like pre-drink back in our rooms? So we're like, yeah, like eventually I convinced everyone to let's go pre-drink in our rooms.
Okay.
And you're allowed to walk and drink with the beer outside too.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Anywhere. I brought a beer into a Starbucks.
Oh, wow.
I don't think you're allowed to do that. But I did it and no one said shit to me.
Yeah, so you didn't get arrested or
No.
ticketed or anything.
So that was awesome. Anyway, we end up going to the room, pre-drinking. Then we go to this awesome club that kind of reminded me of the Nashville Club, where you got up on stage to sing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like live music.
Taking requests?
Taking requests, everything. Birchel's throwing $20 on stage to play songs. Having an awesome night. Then, an hour goes by, we're super up. We're like, okay, let's go to White Castle.
Nice.
End up eating like 15 burgers.
Nice.
And the White Castle was like right beside our hotel where we stayed at.
Yeah.
But we still can't find the hotel. And I'm like, okay, let's go in a cab. Even though it's like, I know we're a minute away, but we're just going to get in a cab. So we see a cab in the White Castle drive-thru. Mm-hmm. So we just hop in the back we just open the door and hop in. And he's like, oh, I'm just having a dessert pop. All right. Where do you want to go? Because he just got like a cheesecake dessert pop. And then we tell him the address and he's like, oh, and just drives us there. And we're like, oh, thank you. What'll that be? And he's like, well, you got any cash? And we're like, yeah. And I pull out what I think is a $10 bill.
Yeah.
But it's $1. So he's like, it's only $3, but I can't take credit. And we're like, oh, what the f-? He's like, we're like, well, all we have is credit. And it's getting kind of contentious.
And you were the only person with cash on.
I only had $1, yeah. No one else had money.
Okay.
And then, so it's getting kind of contentious.
This is the dumbest situation ever.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to charge you $10. And Greg, who's our cheapest friend, was the only one who had like a credit card or whatever. But Greg's so drunk, he just goes, okay, and pays it.
Oh, wow.
But I'm actually kind of pissed. So we leave, and I go, Reggie Miller f***ing sucks. And Reggie was like one of the all-time greats for the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, haha, like got him with a good burn before we left, fellas.
Yeah.
Instantly, I do the 3 taps that every guy does, like for my phone, my keys, and my wallet.
Yeah.
I realize one of the taps is missing.
Oh, no.
The bulge where my phone is gone. I go to do a quick run to the cab driver, and he's peeling out. So I'm like, my phone's gone.
Oh, God.
Luckily, Greg paid through PayPal. I don't know how PayPal works.
Okay.
So we were able to track down our driver's name.
Oh, okay.
His name is Rodney Crum. And we emailed them like, oh, hey, sorry, sir. We had an affair with you tonight. And not an affair, but like a affair. I did suck a but that's not married yet. And then he didn't respond, so I lost my phone that night.
Oh, he hasn't got back to you?
No, and we're in Canada now, and I don't think I'm going to.
That's it. That's all. That's our episode. Thank you for tuning in. You can follow us at Mike on Much on Instagram and Twitter.
The artwork is provided by Jenna Gregory. You can find her stuff at jennadoodles.com. Big shout out to Greg Stewart, who's I don't know what he is in relation to the show, but he's very supportive, and he's one of the reasons why we get guests on the show.
Yes.
So special shout out to Greg Stewart for being, a good pal.
And I would say a lot of the interviews you hear, including the Pete Yorn interview you heard this episode, we do those in Greg's office. He's nice enough to just let us use his office as a space to record these interviews.
So thank you,
Andy
Greg.
sends us like a little funny email after he listens to the pod.
He does, yeah.
Like, this is my favorite part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff goes a long way.
He's great.
But if you're a fan of the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a comment, and tell your friends. Spread the word.
The Mike and Much podcast is produced by Max Kerman, and I am your host, Mike Veerman. See you next week if we don't die on the weekend.